Welcome back to World History Explored. It was 1919. The end of World War I had turned Europe upside down, leaving the old order in tatters and redrawing borders across the continent. A new Polish republic was trying to find its footing while the Bolsheviks were fighting to solidify their revolution in Russia. Amid this chaos, Poland and Soviet Russia found themselves in a full-blown war known as the Polish-Soviet War, which wreaked havoc across Eastern Europe once again. During 1918 and 1919, both the new Polish state and Bolshevik Russia were tangled up in various conflicts. The Poles were battling Germans, Czechoslovaks, Lithuanians, and Western Ukrainians over border disputes, while the Bolsheviks faced off against counter-revolutionary whites, Allied intervention forces, and independence movements in the Baltics and Ukraine. Despite the efforts of Allied peace delegations at the Paris Peace Conference to support Poland, there was no agreement on the exact borders or how much military aid to provide. The proposed Curzon Line didn't satisfy anyone, including Poland, the Bolsheviks, Belarus, Lithuania, the White Russians, and the Ukrainian National Republics. In Poland, Józef Pilsudski and his Socialist Party wanted a federation led by Poland that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Roman Dmowski's National Democrats favored a smaller, more homogeneous Polish nation-state. In Moscow, Bolshevik leaders were divided on their objectives. Some focused on defeating the Whites and consolidating a Soviet state, while others aimed to push the Red Army westward to spread the revolution across Europe. By early 1919, with German troops pulling out, Polish and Red Army forces moved into the void, engaging in skirmishes, guerrilla warfare, and cavalry raids due to the lack of large, organized armies. The Poles managed to push the Bolsheviks out of Minsk and take control of eastern Galicia, while the Red Army was occupied by white forces pushing towards Moscow. The new territories gained by Warsaw were challenging to manage, with a diverse population of mixed ethnicities, languages, and religions. Although many welcomed the Polish army, some locals resisted or felt their local identities were more important than the new Polish state. Polish troops sometimes treated locals harshly, especially Jews, though this was against official policy, and discipline was soon tightened. In 1920, the clashes between Poland and Bolshevik Russia escalated into a full-scale war. Negotiations in March and April failed due to extreme demands from Poland and Bolshevik leaders wanting to continue the fight. The Bolsheviks, having defeated the Whites, prepared for renewed conflict, bringing reinforcements, including the famous 1st Cavalry Army. The Poles, eager to strike before the Red Army could fully pivot west, allied with the Ukrainian National Republic, hoping to establish an independent Ukraine if they could defeat Russia. On April 25, 1920, a joint force of 75,000 Polish and 12,000 Ukrainian troops launched the Kiev offensive against about 30,000 Red Army troops. The Polish Third Army quickly advanced, capturing Kiev with minimal Polish casualties. Although the Poles won a significant victory, they couldn't sustain a full invasion of Russia, and the Red Army still had the capacity to counterattack. With Polish control over eastern Galicia and much of central Ukraine, they saw a chance for a strategic victory by supporting a Ukrainian state to fight alongside them. Pilsudski declared that Polish forces would remain in Ukraine until a legitimate Ukrainian government could take control. However, the attempt to establish an independent Ukraine after World War I ultimately failed, with Petlura unable to form a stable administration or win the support of the weary population. While the fighting raged, Poland faced its own set of political troubles. Opposition leader Roman Dmowski was unhappy with the alliance with Ukraine, and some Polish communists went on strike. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George didn't hold back, criticizing the Poles. The Poles are inclined to be arrogant, and they will have to take care they don't get their heads punched. Meanwhile, the League of Nations in Geneva even accused Poland of deliberately attacking Russia. For the Bolsheviks, the Kiev offensive turned out to be a political windfall. They used the situation to paint the attack as a move by the same Polish aristocratic class that was despised by many Ukrainian peasants. some of whom joined the Bolshevik cause. Even former Imperial Russian General Alexei Brusilov sided with the Bolsheviks. Bolshevik thinker Mikhail Kalinin saw the conflict as an opportunity to spread the revolution into Europe, declaring, "I believe the Polish lords, by marching on the Soviet Republic, are only digging their own graves, but they will only succeed in founding yet another Soviet state through which we will gain close relations with the proletariat of the West." Despite concerns about the Red Army's weak state, the Bolsheviks launched an offensive in Belarus on May 15th. Led by 27-year-old General Mikhail Tukhachevsky, who had Polish roots, they pushed the Poles back over 100 kilometers, easing pressure on Ukraine. However, the Polish counterattacks in June stabilized the northern front. In the south, Budyonny's 1st Cavalry arrived on May 18th, but the Red offensive in Ukraine stumbled at first, with Budyonny losing 2 armored trains and some Cossacks switching sides to the Poles. Nevertheless, the Red Cavalry adapted by operating in smaller groups and targeting key positions, leading to a breakthrough on June 5th. Joseph Stalin later claimed credit for this success, although he was not directly involved. The Poles managed to avoid complete defeat, partly because of Budyonny's indecision and their own aerial advantage. Isaac Babel, in his autobiographical stories, described an attack by a Polish-American squadron. They dropped down to 300 meters and shot up first Andrushka and then Trunov. None of the shots fired by our men did the Americans any harm. By June 10th, the Red Army had retaken Kiev and reached Rivne, Pilsudski's former headquarters, by early July. So, despite their earlier success, the Poles had been pushed back to where they started, and with the Red Army advancing westward, the threat of a European revolution loomed, unless the Poles could pull off a dramatic turnaround. The Bolshevik command was all set to launch a major offensive along the entire front, with Tukhachevsky boldly declaring that the revolution would advance over the corpses of White Poland. In the south, the Red Army fought hard to reach Lviv and laid siege to it in early August. Babel painted a grim picture of the aftermath: a field of horror strewn with mangled dead, inhuman cruelty, unimaginable wounds, crushed skulls, young white naked bodies flashing in the sun, lost notebooks laying about, single pages, paybooks, prayer books, human cadavers in the grain. The main Red push came in the north in July. Outnumbering the Poles by 160,000 to 115,000 and boasting a crucial 3-to-1 advantage in artillery, the Red Army cavalry, led by General Guy, pushed forward. They defeated a Polish force with French tanks at Grodno on the 19th. The Poles tried to fight back, intercepting Red Army telegrams and using old German trenches from World War I, but couldn't stop the Bolsheviks. During this advance, Lithuania also jumped into the fight to reclaim Vilnius from the Poles, although the Reds claimed it as theirs. By August 1st, the Red Army was just 200 kilometers from Warsaw, and a week later, Tukhachevsky's forces were north of the Polish capital, threatening to encircle it. The series of Polish defeats threw the country into crisis. Pilsudski felt the weight of the situation, acknowledging, "This breakdown of our forces, this sinking morale was, in my view, Tukhachevsky's greatest triumph." He later admitted, "I could not trust the morale of the troops, the civilians, or the leaders of either group." Pilsudski even offered his resignation twice, leading to a new government being formed. The crisis also worsened already strained relations between Catholics and Jews, with the War Ministry cutting down the number of Jewish soldiers and placing the rest in labor battalions. As the Red Army pushed into Poland and approached Warsaw, internal conflicts among the Bolshevik commanders complicated matters. Trotsky and Tukhachevsky clashed with Stalin's faction, including Yegorov and Budyonny, preventing a unified military strategy. The Reds also faced unexpected hostility from the local population, mainly Catholics and Jews, worsening their already dire supply situation and contributing to low morale and desertions. By August, the Bolsheviks had about 116,000 troops against 156,000 Polish defenders. Despite the odds, Tukhachevsky launched an assault on Warsaw on August 13, 1920, betting that the Poles wouldn't respond quickly enough. The next day, near Radzymin, Red Army forces pushed the Poles back. However, Polish General Haller's troops, bolstered by French-supplied tanks, rallied and secured a local victory that boosted Polish morale. Some historians argue this was the turning point of the battle. Meanwhile, things weren't going well for Guy's Red Cavalry north of Warsaw. Polish General Sikorski's troops executed a daring counterattack, aided by the fortuitous destruction of a crucial Russian radio, and thwarted the Bolshevik encirclement. Some historians believe this northern battle was the real decisive moment. Regardless, both fronts managed to hold long enough for the main Polish counteroffensive to kick off. On August 16th, the Poles launched a high-risk counteroffensive, shifting units to the southern flank and attacking north to cut off the Bolshevik threat to the capital. They had to move quickly, as Budyonny's cavalry from Lviv could have potentially caught them mid-maneuver if they were too slow. Tukhachevsky, despite being aware of the Polish preparations, didn't fully trust his intelligence. If Budyonny had acted faster, he might have turned the tide of the battle, but as it was, he was too slow. The Polish counteroffensive devastated the Red Army, advancing 120 kilometers into their position. Budyonny was too distant to intervene, leaving Tukhachevsky's forces stuck and unable to capture Warsaw. As the Polish troops pushed through, they cut off Red Army supply lines and forced a chaotic retreat. Abandoned supply trains and artillery, along with the capture of Guy's cavalry in East Prussia, worsened the Red Army's plight. Tukhachevsky planned a defensive stand on the Niemen River with reinforcements, but Polish commanders launched an attack to destroy the Bolshevik Western Front. In mid-September, during the Battle of the Niemen, Polish forces pinned the Bolsheviks at Hrodno. After initial difficulties, Polish cavalry crossed into Lithuanian territory, cutting off a crucial railway line, while other Polish units captured Pinsk. The Red Army had retreated to Minsk by October 18th. Pilsudski's triumphant Order of the Day praised the soldiers' contribution to a strong and free Poland. In early October, Poland signed a ceasefire with the Lithuanians, though the Vilnius question remained unresolved. The day before the ceasefire took effect, Polish General Lucjan Zelegowski and his 1st Lithuanian-Belarusian Division captured Vilnius, ending the brief Polish-Lithuanian War. On October 18th, Warsaw and Moscow agreed to a ceasefire, concluding the fighting. The conflict resulted in approximately 200,000 Polish and over 400,000 Bolshevik soldiers killed, wounded, or captured, with up to 450,000 civilian deaths. Many prisoners of war perished from hunger and disease. The Peace of Riga, signed in March 1921, established new borders, granting Poland disputed East Galicia and Vilnius, while recognizing Soviet control over Ukrainian and Belarusian territories. This treaty shaped Eastern Europe's map for the next 20 years, integrating 1.5 million Poles, but also adding 6 million Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Jews, with 2 million Poles remaining on the Bolshevik side. Pilsudski viewed the Peace of Riga as a failure, lamenting the inability to create a respected federation. Despite this, Poland's victory in 1921 marked a significant moment of national survival. However, less than 20 years later, Poland faced devastation again during World War II, with Georgy Zhukov leading Soviet forces through the country towards Berlin. During World War II, Poland faced immense devastation. In September 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union invaded Poland, swiftly defeating the Polish military and dividing the country between them. The invasion marked the start of World War II in Europe. Under Nazi occupation, Poland experienced brutal repression, including mass executions, forced labor, and the Holocaust, which resulted in the murder of 3 million Polish Jews and countless others. Meanwhile, the Soviet occupation brought its own hardships, including political repression and deportations to Siberia. In 1944, the Soviet Red Army advanced through Poland, and the Warsaw Uprising, led by the Polish Home Army, attempted to liberate Warsaw from Nazi control. However, the uprising was crushed by the Germans, and the city was heavily damaged. The Soviets eventually captured Warsaw in January 1945, advancing further into Germany and contributing to the eventual defeat of the Nazis. After the war, Poland's borders were redrawn, and the country fell under Soviet influence, becoming a satellite state of the Soviet Union until the end of the Cold War. The post-war period saw significant changes in Polish society, politics, and borders, which were reshaped by the outcomes of World War II. And that's that for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, World History Explored, for more updates on the latest movies and shows. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update from us. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.